You never forget the sound of rotor blades when you're minutes away from hell. It's not the noise itself, it's the way it hits your heartbeat. The way it sinks with the fear you try to bury so deep it tastes like steel in your throat. We were flying blacked out over eastern Afghanistan. No lights. No chatter. Just the muted hum of the engines and the heavy silence of 12 men, 12 shadows strapped inside the belly of a bird slicing through the cold midnight air. I was one of them. Call sign Reaper 6. U.S. Special Operations, the kind of unit that didn't officially exist. Our mission: infiltrate a Taliban stronghold on the outskirts of the Shahiko Valley, neutralize a high-value target codenamed the Falcon, and disappear before the sun touched the peaks. Intel said he was an orchestrator, funding, weapons, coordination, a ghost who'd eluded capture for years. Tonight, he'd sleep his last night. Our team leader, Captain Mason, was opposite me, eyes hidden behind NVGs. He tapped the side of his helmet twice, the silent cue, 2 minutes out. Every man adjusted his weapon, checked his gear, locked eyes with the guy next to him. You don't need words when you've trained like we had. Your body knows the drill. Your heart just hopes you'll see daylight again. The pilot's voice crackled softly in our comms. Reaper, this is Hawk 1. You're green in 30. Winds moderate. Good hunting. We touched down on a dry wadi north of the target compound. Sand swirled around us in the rotor wash as we leapt out, moving low, silent, ghosts under the stars. The moment the bird lifted off and its sound faded, the silence hit us, total, crushing silence. Only the crunch of boots on rock and the distant howl of wind between the mountains. We moved fast. The valley stretched like a scar between jagged ridges, dotted with the faint glow of distant fires. The air smelled of dust and diesel. Somewhere ahead, behind thick mud walls and wired gates, the Falcon slept. We advanced in staggered formation, using the terrain as cover. Every ridge, every bush, every flicker of light could hide eyes. Mason raised his fist, halt. We dropped. Waited. A dog barked far away, echoing off the hills. Then silence again. Thermals show 2 sentries, whispered Daniels, our sniper, through the comm. Mason nodded. Take left. I've got right. 2 soft cracks, suppressed shots, and both targets went down without a sound. We were inside the outer perimeter in under 4 minutes. The compound loomed ahead, a cluster of mud buildings with a single steel door and faint lamplight seeping through cracks. The mission plan said the Falcon's quarters were in the central structure. Time, 0:47 hours. Mason signaled to breach. 2 of our guys stacked on the door. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. Then, a quiet click as the charge armed. 3, 2, 1. A muffled blast, the door swung open, and we flowed in, fast, controlled, ruthless precision. Inside was a blur of shadows, light, and motion. Screams. Gunfire. Splinters of plaster flying. We cleared room after room, hearts pounding, breath ragged in our ears. Then, the unexpected. From the far corner, a flash, not from a weapon, but a detonator. Contact. I yelled, but it was too late. The explosion tore through the east wall, showering debris. The blast wave threw me backward into the dirt. My ears rang like a siren. Through the haze, I saw Mason down, motionless. Daniels crawling. Smoke everywhere. The Falcon wasn't running. He was waiting for us. My vision blurred, dust choking my lungs. Through the chaos, a shape moved, a tall man in a black scarf, slipping through a back door with a radio in his hand. Even through the daze, instinct kicked in. I grabbed my rifle, staggered to my feet, and followed. That was the moment we stopped being ghosts. That was the night Operation Silent Dagger truly began. I don't remember hitting the ground, I just remember the sound. The blast had ripped the air apart, a sound like thunder trapped inside a tunnel, and now all I could hear was a ringing that drowned out everything else. My night vision flickered, went black, then came back in flashes. Shapes moved in the haze, teammates crawling, debris falling, smoke rolling along the floor. Mason was down but breathing, blood streaked across his sleeve. Daniels was trying to drag him clear while shouting words I couldn't hear. And then I saw him, a silhouette slipping through the rear door, tall, fast, purposeful. The Falcon. I pushed myself up, every muscle screaming. The air stank of burned powder and dust. Outside the compound, the night was alive, shouting, boots, truck engines starting. The ambush had been planned perfectly. Reaper 6, status, came a voice through the static in my headset. Finally, sound cut through the ringing. It was our Overwatch pilot orbiting miles away. I hissed back, compromised. Mason injured. Target mobile. We're in pursuit. We had one chance. If he reached the ridge, he'd vanish into the maze of gullies that fed the valley, a labyrinth no drone could see into. I sprinted out the back as tracers cut across the yard. They were close, too close. Daniels laid down bursts of cover fire as I moved, dust kicking up around my boots. The desert night swallowed us in seconds. No lights. Just the pulse of gunfire echoing off rock walls. I ran harder, following the Falcon's footsteps in the dirt, faint under the green glow of my goggles. The path climbed sharply. Rocks slid under my boots. Ahead, I saw the glint of metal, a rifle barrel disappearing behind a boulder. He wasn't running anymore. He was waiting again. I dove behind a stone wall as rounds cracked past. Chips of rock sliced my arm, I barely felt it. I switched to single fire and leaned out just enough to see movement. One breath. One squeeze. The flash of my own muzzle lit the darkness for an instant. Silence followed. When I reached the boulder, he was gone, just a trail of footprints leading upward into the mountains. He'd drawn us out, away from the team, into terrain that belonged to him. The radio crackled, Reaper 6, fall back. More hostiles inbound from the east ridge. I looked back. The valley floor was alive with headlights. Dozens of them. Too many to fight. Too late to run. I had a decision to make, abandon the pursuit or risk everything to finish it. Mason would have told me to pull back, regroup, live to fight again. But Mason wasn't on his feet anymore. I tightened my grip on the rifle, turned toward the mountains, and kept climbing. The wind howled like a warning, but I didn't stop. The mission hadn't changed, it had just gotten personal. That was the night I realized, sometimes survival isn't about living through it. It's about refusing to die before the job's done. The trail wound upward like a scar carved into the rock. Cold air burned my lungs with every breath, and the thin Afghan wind hissed through the gullies like a living thing. Down below, the valley glowed faintly with firelight, the compound burning, our bird long gone. I was alone. I switched my radio to whisper mode. Reaper 6 to Hawk 1. Target mobile. Moving northwest through elevation 721. Lost comms with team. Static. Nothing else. The mountains had swallowed the signal whole. So I kept moving, slower now, careful. Each step on loose gravel could echo for miles. The moon hung low and red, throwing shadows that seemed to move on their own. The footprints I was tracking grew lighter, one set, same boots, same stride. He was still ahead, maybe an hour. I checked my ammo, 2 full mags, 1 partial. Water bottle half gone. That was enough. Had to be. Halfway up the slope I found the first sign of how well he knew these ridges, a narrow path masked by a fallen rock. I climbed over it, and something metallic caught my eye, a tripwire glinting under moonlight. He was planting traps behind him. Smart. Too smart. I disabled it carefully, fingers steady even though my pulse hammered in my throat. Every sound, wind, gravel, the click of my gear, felt magnified. When I finally reached the ridgeline, the world opened up. Jagged peaks cut against the sky, and far to the north the border lights flickered like stars that had lost their way. Somewhere out there, the Falcon was running for those lights. I crouched behind a boulder and scanned with my scope. Heat signatures shimmered faintly in the distance, 4 figures, moving fast. He wasn't alone after all. That changed everything. I reported again, hoping the mountains would pity me this time. Reaper 6 to command, eyes on multiple hostiles with HVT, grid 139. The static cracked, and then, faintly. Copy that, hold, extraction window closes in 60 minutes. I had 1 hour to stop them before they crossed into no-go territory. I slung my rifle, took one last drink of warm water, and started down the far side. The slope was brutal, shale sliding under my boots, cuts opening on my hands from every fall. My breath turned to smoke in the cold. Halfway down, I froze. Voices. Arabic mixed with Pashto, drifting up the rocks below me. I eased down, belly against stone, peering over the edge. 4 men, one of them taller, wrapped in black, moving like a commander. The Falcon. They stopped at a small ravine where an old truck waited. One of them climbed in, the others kept guard. I steadied my rifle on the rock, lined up the scope, crosshairs hovering over the man in black. 1 shot, 1 second, end of mission. But then another voice came through my headset, broken but clear. Reaper 6, do not engage, repeat, do not engage. Airstrike inbound. Pull back now. I looked again. The truck's engine coughed to life. If I waited for the strike, he might escape again. If I fired, I'd blow my position and die on this mountain. My finger tightened on the trigger. The wind howled, drowning everything else. For a heartbeat, time froze, me, the mountains, the man who'd caused so much death. Then I exhaled. Negative, command, I whispered. Target in sight. I'm taking the shot. I still remember the silence before the shot. That strange, suffocating quiet that falls right before you pull the trigger, when the whole world seems to stop and hold its breath with you. Through my scope, the Falcon stood framed in the moonlight, tall, confident, unaware. His guards smoked near the trucks, weapons slung lazy over their shoulders. He was just a silhouette at that distance, but I knew it was him. The way he moved. The posture. The arrogance. My finger tightened around the trigger. This was it. Months of intelligence. Weeks of waiting. Hours of crawling through the dirt and cold. All of it came down to one clean shot. Exhale. Steady. Squeeze. The rifle cracked. The sound tore through the valley, sharp, fast, final. Through the scope, I saw him jerk back, a dark burst on his chest. He dropped instantly. Target down, I whispered into my mic, my voice steady but my pulse pounding like a drumline. And then, the valley exploded. A shout echoed from below, followed by gunfire. One guard hit the ground, the other ran for the trucks, screaming orders in Pashto. Headlights flared to life. A machine gun opened up, wild and furious, chewing into the rocks above me. Reaper 6, this is Overwatch, you're compromised. Pull back, now. Static burned my ear. No time to think. I rolled off the ridge and hit the dirt hard. Rocks tore my gloves. I was already moving, sliding, crawling, rolling, anything to stay ahead of the tracers slicing the night. The calm precision was gone. Now it was chaos. Pure, primal chaos. I heard Daniel's voice over comms, tight with panic. "Reaper 6, where the hell are you? We're taking fire from the south. On your flank." I gasped, dropping beside him behind a half-buried boulder. Dust covered us both. Bullets sparked off the rock like angry hornets. Mason appeared out of nowhere, his left sleeve soaked red. "We need to move, now. They've got us boxed." He was right. The Falcon's men weren't breaking, they were closing. Tightening the noose. Our exfil chopper couldn't land in this kill zone. We had one option: climb north toward the ridge and pray the pilot could find a patch clear enough to extract. We dragged the Falcon's body toward us, not for glory, but proof. Command needed eyes on the target. Daniel stripped a radio from his vest, shoved it into my hand. "See if you can get a ping. Anything." The radio hissed, sputtered, nothing but static. Then, faintly, a voice, "Eagle inbound. 3 mics. Get clear. 3 minutes." Might as well have been 3 hours in that hell. We started the climb. The path was a nightmare, narrow, steep, covered in loose shale. One bad step and you'd roll into a canyon that never ended. Behind us, the gunfire never stopped. The Taliban were chasing ghosts, but they were getting closer. Halfway up, a mortar screamed overhead. It hit below us, the shockwave slapped the breath from my lungs. I hit the ground, ears ringing, vision spinning. For a few seconds I couldn't hear anything but the echo in my skull. When I got up, Mason was still climbing. Daniels was hauling the Falcon's body like it weighed nothing. Adrenaline made men into machines. "Move, move, move," Mason shouted. The ridge was just ahead. The first light of dawn broke over the mountains, pale gold spilling across the gray stone. For a moment, it felt unreal. Like we were climbing out of the night itself. Then I saw them, shadows moving fast across the lower slope. Reinforcements. Maybe a dozen, maybe more. I hit the dirt, raised my rifle, and started firing controlled bursts. Daniels joined me, the rhythm steady, pop pop pop. We bought seconds, then meters, then hope. But they kept coming. We were running out of ammo, and the ridge was still too far for extraction. "Flare!" I shouted. Mason fumbled in his vest, pulled one out, and fired it into the sky. The red light cut through the smoke, a bleeding star against the dawn. And for the first time all night, I heard it, the sound of rotor blades. Distant at first, then louder, closer. The most beautiful sound in the world. The bird roared over the ridge, gunner side open, machine gun thundering down on the valley. Dust and heat washed over us. I grabbed Mason's vest and pushed him toward the landing zone. We ran like madmen. Bullets shredded the dirt around us, and still we ran. The crew chief's hand reached out through the doorway. Mason jumped first, Daniels next, dragging the Falcon's body. I turned, fired one last burst into the smoke below, then leapt. The floor hit hard. The chopper banked left, climbing fast. The valley dropped away beneath us. Through the haze, I saw the compound burning. The Falcon was gone, and so were half his men. But not all of them. And not the war. Mason sat across from me, breathing heavy, face pale. Daniels looked like death warmed over, staring blankly out the open door. I stared too. Down at the endless brown and red of the Afghan desert, and thought about the shot, that single, perfect shot, and how it had changed everything. We'd completed the mission. But deep down, I knew something had shifted that night. The Falcon was dead, but so was the illusion that we were untouchable. And as the chopper carried us into the dawn, I realized that courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about moving anyway, even when your hands were shaking and your world was on fire. They say the hardest part of war isn't the fight, it's what comes after. The silence that follows. The ringing in your ears. The moment you realize you survived when others didn't. We touched down at Forward Base Lancer just after sunrise. The bird's wheels hit the dirt, and the whole chopper rattled like it might shake itself apart. The second we stopped, medics stormed in, shouting, grabbing, checking vitals. Mason got pulled off the stretcher, his shoulder a mess of blood and shrapnel. Daniel staggered after him, pale as a ghost, but still on his feet. Me? I just sat there. Helmet in my lap, hands trembling. The Falcon's radio still hung around my neck, dead, silent, but heavy as guilt. Reaper 6? I looked up. It was Captain Sloan, RCO, hard eyes, dust on his boots. He didn't ask how I was, commanders rarely do. He just scanned the bird, then met my gaze. Did you get him? I nodded once. Confirmed kill. Falcons neutralized. Sloan's jaw flexed. Good. Intel says his network just went dark across 3 provinces. You did your job. He started to turn away, then stopped. But next time, he said quietly, make sure you come back with more than ghosts. He walked off. I didn't answer. The med tent smelled like antiseptic, sweat, and fear. I sat beside Mason's cot as they stitched him up. He was awake, barely, his face gray with pain. You did good out there, I told him. He smirked weakly. Didn't feel like it. You're still breathing, brother. That's good enough. He closed his eyes. Yeah, for now. That, for now, hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Afghanistan didn't give you peace. It gave you a pause between storms. 2 days later, we were back in the field. No rest, no reset, just another briefing in a dim tent lit by a single flickering bulb. The Falcon was gone, but his lieutenants weren't. Intel believed one of them, codename Cobra, was regrouping near the Pakistani border, planning retaliation for our strike. Our orders were simple, intercept and confirm. But we all knew what that meant, more blood, more ghosts, and another mission that might not have a clean way out. I checked my gear in silence. My rifle still bore the same scratch across the receiver, a reminder from the ridge. My boots were still caked with dust from the night of the Falcon. Mason walked in, arm in a sling, half grinning. You're not leaving me behind, are you? I raised an eyebrow. You can't even hold your rifle. Doesn't mean I can't fight. That was Mason, too stubborn to quit, too loyal to walk away. Daniels joined us next, chewing on a protein bar, his eyes dark and distant. The 3 of us had bled together, and that kind of bond didn't fade. The captain stepped in, spreading a map across the table. New op, he said, voice flat. We move at 0200. In and out. This isn't capture this time, Cobra's not worth the paperwork. This is termination. He looked directly at me. Reaper 6, you're leading. My stomach dropped. Leading meant responsibility. Leading meant if things went wrong again, it was on me. But I didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. That night, before we rolled out, I sat alone outside the barracks. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, a black sea of sand and shadow. Somewhere out there, another ghost waited. Another name we'd erase in the dark. I looked at the stars, thousands of them, cold and perfect, and thought about home. My father used to tell me that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the ability to move forward in spite of it. He'd been a soldier too. He never came back. I wondered if this was how he'd felt before his last mission, sitting under a foreign sky, knowing he might not see another dawn. The radio on my chest buzzed softly. Mason's voice came through, low and rough. Hey, Reaper, you ready? I smiled faintly, though no one could see it. As ready as I'll ever be. We moved out at 0200. The convoy rolled silent, headlights off, cutting through the valley like shadows on wheels. The wind carried the scent of dust, diesel, and tension. Every mission starts the same, quiet, controlled, professional. And every mission ends in chaos. As we neared the border hills, the radio crackled, faint, then sharp. Daniels leaned forward, listening. Movement ahead, he whispered. Heat signatures, at least 6. Maybe more. I raised my hand, signaling a halt. The engines died. The desert went silent again, that same unbearable quiet before everything shatters. I could feel it in my bones. Something wasn't right. Eyes up, I murmured. We're not alone. That's when the first explosion hit. A blinding flash tore through the night, flipping the lead vehicle in a storm of fire and sand. The shockwave slammed into us like a hammer. I hit the dirt hard, ears ringing, lungs burning. The convoy was ambushed. And this time, it was us who were hunted. The explosion didn't sound like the movies. It wasn't one clean boom, it was a scream that ripped the air apart. A white-hot flash, then the world flipped sideways. The lead Humvee was gone, replaced by a fireball clawing at the sky. I felt the shockwave in my chest before I heard it in my ears. Sand, metal, and smoke rained down like angry confetti. Someone shouted my name, but all I could hear was ringing, endless, high-pitched ringing. Training kicked in before thought. Contact front. I roared, diving behind the nearest rock formation. My rifle came up on instinct. The night was alive with gunfire now, orange streaks cutting through the dark like tracer lightning. Mason. Daniels. Report. Static. Then Mason's voice, raw and strained, I'm hit, but I'm good. 2 men down, east side. Daniels' voice cut in next, breathless. Multiple tangos on the ridge. RPG team setting up. Take them before they fire again. I barked. I crawled forward, using the shattered hull of the Humvee for cover. My hands moved on muscle memory, mag out, mag in, charge, fire. The rifle bucked against my shoulder, familiar and grounding. Through the smoke I saw movement, silhouettes darting between boulders, muzzle flashes blinking like fireflies. I aimed for the flicker, squeezed, shifted, squeezed again. Each burst pushed them back, but they kept coming. They knew we were here. They knew our route. This wasn't chance. This was an execution. Mason slid beside me, clutching his bleeding arm, his face smeared with soot. They've got the high ground. We stay here, we die here. Then we move. I shouted. Where? I pointed toward a narrow gully cutting through the hills, steep, rocky, but it led north toward open ground where the chopper could see us. Smoke cover. Daniels on rear. Move on my mark. I popped a smoke grenade, the canister clattering on stone. A bloom of gray fog swallowed the night. The world shrank to 10 feet of chaos. Move. We sprinted. Boots slamming against gravel, lungs burning, rounds snapping overhead like angry bees. The air was thick with grit and the metallic tang of cordite. Somewhere behind us, another explosion ripped the earth apart, an RPG slamming into the wreck we'd left. The blast threw heat against my back like an open furnace. We dove into the gully, sliding down loose sand and rock. Mason grunted as he hit bottom, rolling behind a ridge of shale. Daniels dropped beside him, breathing hard. Head count. I shouted. 5 of us left. Daniels answered. Keller and Ross are gone. The words hit harder than the blast. Keller had been the youngest, barely 21. Ross was the joker, the guy who kept everyone sane. Just like that, both were ghosts. Bullets hammered the rock above us. Chips of stone peppered my face. "They're closing in," Mason warned. "Let them." I steadied my rifle on the edge of the gully. "They want a fight? We give it to them." They came in waves, shouting, firing, their muzzle flashes bright against the dark. I squeezed off short bursts, aiming low to keep them pinned. Daniel's saw opened up beside me, the barrel glowing red in the night. The air was a thunderstorm of noise and smoke. "Ammo's running low." Mason yelled. "Make it count." Then, a new sound cut through the chaos. A whistle. High, sharp. "Mortar. Down." I shouted. The shell hit 30 yards away. The shockwave punched the air from my lungs. Debris rained down. The gully shuddered like the world was ending. When the dust cleared, I tasted blood. Daniels was coughing beside me, face streaked with soot. Mason was on one knee, rifle shaking in his one good hand. "We can't stay here," I said, spitting grit. "They'll box us in." "Where to?" Daniels asked. I looked toward the ridgeline, jagged, distant, but it offered height, and maybe a chance. "Up there. We reach that peak, we call an eagle for fire support." Daniels gave a tight nod. "Copy that." We climbed. Every step felt heavier, slower. The slope was slick with dust and blood. My pack weighed a ton, my rifle felt like lead. But stopping wasn't an option. The Taliban kept firing, blind now, but persistent. Tracers zipped past us like angry wasps. One round caught my shoulder plate, spinning me sideways. Pain flared hot and fast, but the armor held. I bit down a curse and kept climbing. By the time we reached the top, the horizon was burning, a deep orange glow spreading across the desert. Dawn was coming, and with it, visibility. I keyed my radio, voice raw. "Eagle, this is Reaper 6. We're pinned North Ridge, grid coordinates Delta 9. Request immediate air support, over." Static hissed, then a voice broke through, calm, professional, familiar. "Copy, Reaper 6. Eagle inbound. ETA 2 minutes. Mark your position." I yanked a flare from my vest and fired it skyward. A streak of red split the morning light. Then the gunship appeared, a dark silhouette against the dawn. Its minigun spun up, and the world turned into thunder. The ridge below erupted in flame and dust as the bird rained hell across the valley. We crouched behind the rocks, faces lit by the firestorm. The ground shook. The enemy line disintegrated. And then, just as quickly, it was over. Silence again. Only the crackle of fire and the low hum of the helicopter circling overhead. We made it to the extraction zone an hour later. 5 men went out. 3 came back. As the chopper lifted, I looked down at the blackened wrecks and the bodies scattered in the sand. The ambush was over, but something in me had changed. This wasn't just war anymore. It was survival. It was personal. We'd been the hunters. Now we knew what it felt like to be the hunted. And I swore, as the desert slipped away beneath us, that I'd never let my men be caught like that again. Not while I was still breathing. They tell you leadership is about making decisions. They never tell you it's about living with them afterward. The base felt wrong when we got back, too quiet, too clean. The desert wind blew dust across the landing pad, and as the rotors slowed, the silence rushed in like a flood. 3 of us walked off that bird. 5 didn't. No cheers. No salutes. Just a few medics waiting with stretchers, and the grim faces of men who knew exactly what those black bags meant. Mason limped ahead of me, his shoulder freshly bandaged. Daniels followed, his expression hollow, eyes glassy with something deeper than exhaustion. I trailed behind, rifle hanging from my hand, dust still clinging to my face. We'd done everything right. Followed the book. Executed the plan. And still, we bled. The debriefing was a blur. Captain Sloan paced the room, jaw tight, eyes colder than I'd ever seen. Intel was compromised, he said, voice low. Cobra's men knew your route, your timing, even your extraction point. Someone leaked it. The words dropped like grenades. Daniels cursed under his breath. Mason slammed his good fist against the table. Sir, you think someone from our side tipped them? I asked. Sloan didn't answer. He just stared at me. All I know is you walked into a trap and still walked out. That counts for something. He turned toward the map pinned on the wall, a scatter of red dots marking enemy strongholds. Cobra's gone underground. But he's not done. He'll strike back. He looked back at me. And when he does, I'm sending you to finish it. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Keller's face, young, grinning, full of life, then gone in the fire. Ross screaming into the radio, the blast swallowing his words. Ghosts. They always come back at night. I sat outside the barracks, rifle across my knees, watching the stars blur in the heat haze. The Afghan desert stretched endless around me, vast, indifferent, eternal. You start to understand things out there, things the world back home will never grasp. That courage isn't about medals or speeches. It's about standing back up after watching everything fall apart. Mason joined me just before dawn. He looked older, somehow, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Can't rest? He asked, lighting a cigarette. I shook my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see that ridge. He took a drag, exhaled smoke into the cool morning air. You did what you had to. We all did. Doesn't feel like it. That's the job, brother, he said quietly. We do the work, and the ghosts do the remembering. I looked at him. And what about us? He flicked the cigarette into the dirt, the ember glowing faintly. We survive. That's all that matters now. A week later, the orders came through. Operation Viper's Den. Intel finally tracked Cobra to a compound in the Narration Mountains, a labyrinth of caves and stone structures deep in no man's land. He wasn't running anymore. He was daring us to come. It was suicide territory, narrow passes, high elevation, enemy territory through and through. But Sloan didn't flinch. Neither did I. I called the team together, what was left of us. New faces had replaced the fallen. Fresh uniforms, fresh eyes that didn't yet know the weight of loss. I briefed them carefully. No promises, no bravado. Just facts. We move fast. We move quiet. We leave no one behind. Mason stood beside me, the sling gone now, though his arms still stiff. Daniel sat in the corner, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision, the kind of focus men use to drown out the noise inside their heads. When I finished, Mason stepped forward. You think this Cobra knows we're coming? Oh, he knows, I said. He's counting on it. A grim smile crossed Mason's face. Good. Then let's disappoint him. Later that night, as we geared up, Daniels approached me. He hesitated, then said, Boss, we can't take another hit like last time. I met his eyes. We won't. He nodded, but I could see the doubt there, the quiet, creeping fear every soldier carries but never speaks aloud. He turned away before I could say more. When I was finally alone, I opened my notebook, a habit I'd picked up after my first deployment. Inside were names. Every man we'd lost since I first stepped into this desert. Keller. Ross. Torres. Malik. I ran my thumb over their names, one by one, and made myself a promise. If Cobra was the reason they were gone, I'd end it. Personally. The mission wasn't about strategy anymore. It was about balance. It was about ghosts that needed to rest. And by the time the sun rose over the Narration peaks, I was ready. Because sometimes courage isn't about living. It's about being willing to walk back into the fire, knowing full well it might be the last thing you ever do. The Narration peaks looked like a wall of teeth from the bird. Gray stone, black gullies, and a sky that promised weather you didn't want to be caught in. We slid into the drop zone quiet as a myth, no lights, no radio chatter beyond the hush of breath and the soft snap of gear. Every man moved like a shadow with a purpose. Viper's den wasn't a den at all. It was a knot of caves and stone houses stitched into the mountainside, old stonework softened by time and terror. Paths threaded between cliff faces like veins. The whole place felt built to hide men and secrets, and both are harder to root out in the dark. We stacked in pairs and flowed into the pass. The new guys moved tight on our heels, their boots careful, faces lit by the green glow of NVGs. Mason watched the team like a shepherd. Daniels had his face painted, breath steady, that sniper comm he wore like armor. I carried the plan in my head: entry, clear, isolate, exfil, but plans wilt fast against real stones and real bullets. We had eyes from above, a drone whispering like a moth, camera hot to the feed in my ear. It painted heat signatures, 2 at the first compound, 4 at the trade post, and a cluster down in the courtyard like ants crowded at a spill. One silhouette looked bigger than the rest: Cobra's pattern. Broad shoulders. Slow walk. Command posture. We closed to within toss distance of the first compound. Mason sent a hand signal, 2 up. We moved. Breach was quick and precise: 3 charges, a thud, a swallow of dust, then us inside. The room smelled of wood smoke and wet wool. A child's toy lay half buried beneath a blanket, an unkind detail in a violent place. We cleared rooms like a surgeon, but the den had scars of its own. Nails were set into thresholds, lines of woven wire slung between beams. Traps. Old men's ways, but with modern cruelty. It started slow, a snap here, a soft click there. A pressure plate flipped under a boot, a shotgun barked across a corridor. I dove, pulled a man down, felt the rush as pellets chewed at our throat. Daniels crawled forward and answered with a controlled burst that burned the wall open. We kept moving. We were taught to make noise mean less, but the den made noise into its language, and the language wasn't ours. Then we heard laughter, low, close, a dry thing that rolled off the stone. It didn't fit the crack of rifles or the shout of men. It fit Cobra. Somewhere deeper, the high courtyard opened and the silhouette moved like a silhouette should not move, confident, even amused. Mason cut the team into 2. Half would fan the inner compounds, half would push down the goat path to cut escape routes. I took the lead on the sweep inward. We flowed through packed rooms, through small doorways built for shorter men and narrower minds. We found caches, crates of ammo, pressure switches, a little workshop where men had been busy unmaking peace into more weapons. Every cache was proof that Cobra was more than a man, he was a machine. The courtyard burst open like a wound. Men painted in black coalesced into formations. We hit them with everything we had. Flashbangs popped like distant thunder, giving us a second of blind advantage. The fight was up close, filthy, fists, blades, knife work in narrow alleys, the kind of fight that leaves no room for glory. Mason took a shot to the side, blood painted his ribs red. Daniels snapped a shoulder back into position and kept firing. In the middle of the chaos, I caught sight of Cobra through the smoke. He was not what I expected. Not a hulking brute, not a mask of hatred, just a man with eyes that liked the taste of chaos. He watched as if he were the one staging a play, as if our blood were a cue for another act. He turned once and vanished among the alleys like a shadow swallowing itself. We pushed. We took ground. We paid for every inch with breaths and teeth. For every man we dropped, 2 more tried to fill the hole. The den was thick with fighters who knew where to be and how to melt away. It was terrible math. We could burn a room, clear a hall, but the mountain simply had more rooms. Halfway through the sweep, Mason grabbed my sleeve and hissed, "They're moving the prisoners." My head snapped. Prisoners. Men and women shackled in a back cave, eyes wide and hollows under the skin. Children, too. The worst part about victory is realizing it's measured in who you get back. We redirected. Daniels and 2 others took the back passage, I took point to the holding cell. We spilled into a low chamber and the light from my NVG haloed across faces, a man clutching a shard of cloth around a child's head, an old woman with hands like broken tools. They looked at us as if we were a prayer. "No time for hugs," Mason growled, but his voice trembled. "Move." We started unshackling, ripping chains with bayonets and teeth, but the den had one last mercy, the alarms. A bell clanged on the ridge, not a simple warning, but a coordinated cacophony. I felt the air change. We had been expected to be quick, the den expected us to be clumsy. We were neither. We hustled the freed to the stairwell, arranged them behind cover, and I radioed in. The drone feed went dark. The sky closed. The birds we relied on vanished as if the mountain swallowed their sight. Then I saw him, Cobra, at the mouth of the stairwell, surrounded now, not by fighters but by broken men and women with rifles raised like a chorus. He walked with deliberate calm, the kind of calm a man wears when he wants others to lose it. He spoke in Pashto, slow and clear. The language cut into the stone, "You break my house, you break my law." His words were a threat wrapped as a statement. We answered with bullets. He smiled, as if the idea of being shot was another story he'd already planned for. We fought for the stairwell like it was a goddamn gate to the world. They pushed. We pushed back. In the prison of that struggle, everything condensed into small, violent details, the rope of my pulse, the grit under my nails, the smell of burnt wood. I fought like a man who refused to be catalogued as a failure. I fought for Mason's nod, for Daniel's steady breath, for the men whose names I kept in my pocket. The fight bled and blurred. Men screamed. The den became a throat, and we were choking on the desert's hunger. Somewhere, above, behind, to the side, mortar whistles began again. I found my feet. I found a blade. I found a way to push forward. We surged like a tide, small and furious and impossible. We fought until our lungs wouldn't let us anymore, and then we fought some more. In the end, when the smoke finally thinned and the bodies lay where they fell, Cobra was gone, slipped away in the crush, like a rumor dying at dawn. We'd freed some, but lost others in the press. We'd carved a hole in the den and burned it with our presence, but the mountain did not yield its teeth without chewing. The prisoners we recovered cried until they couldn't, they called us saviors and cursed us in the same breath, because war has no clean language for thanks. When the dust finally settled, only a few of our men were left standing without being carried. We dragged as many of the freed as we could and formed a shaky convoy toward the drop zone. The drone feed was gone forever, jammed by devices we'd found in the caves. No overhead, no eyes in the sky. Just us and the raw geometry of the rocks. Mason clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough to rattle my teeth. "You did good," he said, voice shotgun rough. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the weight of truth to be that simple. But I also knew what the mountain does, it keeps names like teeth in its jaw. Cobra may have run, but the den had been wounded, and wounded beasts return angrier. We carried that with us, prisoners, some alive, some too far gone, the memory of a laughter that didn't fit in the dark. We left with hands empty of the prize we wanted and full of the cost we'd paid. As we moved away, the first hint of morning bled through the gullies. I thought about the ledger in my pocket, the list of men I'd vowed to make whole again. The den was a wound, our job wasn't to stitch it closed. Our job was to keep walking into places that needed light and hold that light until someone came to help. Viper's den had taken much. It had also given us a kind of blunt, terrible clarity. The war didn't end when you walked away. It stayed, hidden in the caves, waiting. And the price of finding it, the price of naming it, was never cheap. We moved before the sun was fully up. The mountain air was thin and cold enough to bite, and every breath tasted like dust and gunpowder. The prisoners, what was left of them, stumbled along between us. Some couldn't walk, others wouldn't stop looking back, like they expected the den to come alive again and drag them home. We were 20 clicks from the extraction point. No drone feed. No comms. Just the silent weight of the wounded and the slow, dying rhythm of our boots in gravel. Mason walked ahead of me, his uniform torn, blood dried to a dark patch across his ribs. Daniels limped at the rear, rifle slung tight, eyes sweeping every ridge. His calm had hardened into something colder. You could smell it on all of us, that quiet, desperate burn that comes when adrenaline dies and only survival remains. Halfway through the canyon, we hit the first ambush. A single crack, sniper fire, and the man beside me dropped like his strings were cut. Cover! I shouted, and the whole column dove for the rocks. The freed prisoners scattered, some froze, clutching each other like the earth could swallow them. Mason was already on the radio, his voice low and sharp, "We've got company. East Ridge. 500 meters. Find that shooter." Daniel steadied his rifle on a boulder and squinted through the scope. "One shooter," he muttered. "No, make that two. They're baiting us." I saw movement then, dust kicking off a ridge, the glint of metal, and realized he was right. It wasn't an ambush. It was a hunt. We weren't supposed to get out alive. "Move the civilians west," I barked. "Mason, you're on rear cover. Daniels, suppress left flank. We'll cut through the dry riverbed." We moved fast, zigzagging through the rocks, bursts of gunfire chasing us. Each shot echoed across the canyon walls, a reminder that every step forward could be our last. A woman screamed, shrapnel tore her leg. I grabbed her under the arms, hauling her through the dust while Mason laid down suppressing fire, his rifle coughing short, angry bursts. Every bullet he fired was a heartbeat I owed him later. We dove into the dry riverbed, a trench of broken stone and pale sand, and finally caught a breath. The sun was climbing now, throwing gold light across the ridge, and for a second the whole world looked calm again. Then the radio crackled. Static. Then a voice. Deep. Mocking. "You can run, American, but the mountain remembers you. Cobra." He was still alive. I froze, the sound cutting straight through the morning. The team looked to me, Mason's jaw tightening, Daniel's knuckles white on the rifle. He'd slipped the trap, just like before. And now he was hunting us on his own ground. We had a choice. Go dark and hope he lost us. Or turn the hunt around. I made the call before I could think better of it. "Mason, get the civilians to extraction. Daniels and I will draw him off." Mason's eyes went wide. "That's suicide." "So was Viper's den," I said. "And we're still breathing." He held my stare for a long second, then nodded. "Don't die for nothing. Wouldn't dream of it." Daniels and I peeled off toward the east ridge, moving light, just rifles, grenades, and what was left of our willpower. The path wound up between jagged boulders, and the higher we climbed, the more the wind screamed through the gaps. It wasn't long before we heard them. Voices in Pashto. A dozen, maybe more. Moving fast. Daniels crouched beside me. We could ghost them. Slide past and let Mason get clear. I shook my head. Cobra's tracking us. If we vanish, he'll circle back. Daniels exhaled through his teeth. Then we make a stand. Not here, I said. We'll pick the ground. We found it, a narrow choke point where the canyon split in two, one path leading north toward the extraction zone, the other deeper into the rocks. Perfect ambush ground. We set 2 claymores under a veil of stones, rigged a flare trip, then settled in behind cover. Minutes passed. Then shadows. Then shapes. The first fighter came around the bend, cautious, rifle up. Then another. And another. We waited until the trail was packed tight. Daniels glanced at me, smirked once, and whispered, "Showtime." I hit the detonator. The mountain erupted. Rock and dust filled the air, screams echoing off the canyon walls. Gunfire snapped back, wild and blind. We rolled out from cover and opened up, cutting through the chaos, moving with the rhythm that only comes from muscle memory and desperation. One of the fighters broke free and charged, rifle raised. I fired once, missed. Daniels didn't. Another came from the flank, hurling a grenade. It landed between us. We dove opposite directions, the explosion lifting the earth out from under me. My ears rang. Everything blurred. Through the haze, I saw Daniels clutching his side, blood pouring through his fingers. Daniels. I crawled toward him, dragging my rifle. "Stay with me." He grinned through the pain. "You always were, a lousy shot." "Shut up." I pressed a bandage to the wound. "You'll make it." He caught my wrist. "Go finish it." "What?" He coughed, breath hitching. "Cobra. End it. That's why we came." I wanted to argue. But then I saw his eyes, calm, unafraid. The kind of courage that doesn't need to shout. I nodded once. "I'll see you on the other side." He gave a faint smile. "Bet you will." I left him there with his rifle, his back to the canyon wall. The last time I looked, he was still aiming, still fighting. That image, steady, defiant, would stay with me for the rest of my life. The trail curved upward into shadow, and that's where I found the tracks, heavy boots, fresh prints, leading into a cave that split the ridge. Cobra's lair. The hunt had turned full circle. I checked my mag. 5 rounds left. Then I stepped inside. The air was cold, the light thin and gray. I could hear the faint echo of breathing ahead, steady, controlled. I crept forward, the rifle tight against my shoulder, finger resting on the trigger. A whisper came from the dark. "You should have stayed down, soldier." I froze. His voice was closer than I thought. "You talk too much," I said. The silence that followed was long enough to count heartbeats. Then, movement. A flicker of shape in the shadows. A gun barrel glinting faintly. I fired first. The flash lit the cave for half a second, just enough to see him duck behind a rock. He fired back, round sparking off stone, deafening in the confined space. We danced in the dark, hunter and hunted, until a ricochet tore my shoulder open. The pain was white-hot, but I didn't stop. I rolled behind cover, blood slicking my fingers, and waited. Then, footsteps. Slow. Confident. He thought I was done. I let him come closer. Closer. Until I could hear his breath. Then I swung the rifle up, fired point blank, and the sound of the shot filled the cave like thunder. When the smoke cleared, Cobra was on the ground, eyes wide, a thin smile frozen on his lips. He reached for something, maybe a gun, maybe pride, but his hand fell short. I lowered my rifle and stared at him for a long moment. He wasn't a monster anymore. Just a man who believed his cause was worth every body he left behind. Maybe that's what made him dangerous. Maybe that's what made him familiar. Outside, the wind howled through the pass. I took one last look, then turned toward the light. By the time I reached the rendezvous, the sun was already sinking. Mason stood beside the evac chopper, bloodied but alive, prisoners loaded and ready. He looked at me, saw the limp, the blood, and nodded. "Did you get him?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just climbed aboard and looked out at the mountains, their peaks burning gold in the last light. Finally, I said, "Yeah. I got him." The blade spun up, dust rising in a storm around us. As the bird lifted, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, lined with everything the war had taken. And I thought about Daniels. About Keller. About all of them. You can win the battle, survive the war. But the ghosts always fly home with you. It's been 3 years since that day in Narration. 3 years since the chopper lifted us out of the canyon and left the mountains to their silence. Sometimes I still hear the rotors in my dreams, that deep, rhythmic beat that always meant either salvation, or goodbye. When I came home, the world looked different. Cleaner. Softer. People laughed in grocery stores. Kids ran through sprinklers. It was all ordinary. But after what we'd seen, ordinary felt like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. They pinned medals on my chest. Said words like valor, courage under fire, mission success. But I kept thinking about the names in my pocket. Keller. Ross. Daniels. Torres. Malik. The men who didn't come back. The ghosts that never stopped marching beside me. Every night, when the house went still, I'd find myself sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon, the same way I used to stare out over the desert, waiting for dawn. There's something about silence that only soldiers understand. It isn't peace. It's memory, holding its breath. Mason still calls sometimes. He runs a training program now, teaching new recruits how to survive long enough to understand why they're fighting. He jokes that we're getting old. I tell him I've been old since 25. He laughs, but we both know what he means. War doesn't age you in years, it ages you in miles. And Afghanistan gave us enough miles for a lifetime. Sometimes we meet at the range. He still shoots better than me. Says Daniels would haunt me if I didn't keep my aim sharp. He's probably right. There's a photo on my wall, the team before the den. 8 men, smiling like we were invincible. Sand in our boots, sun in our eyes, no clue what was coming. When I look at that photo now, I don't see soldiers. I see brothers. Men who carried the weight so others didn't have to. People ask what courage looks like. They expect stories about firefights or explosions or last stands. But courage isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the hand that reaches for yours in the dark, the breath you take after the blast, the moment you choose to keep moving when the easy choice is to stay down. There's something else they never tell you. Courage doesn't end when the shooting stops. It's in learning to live again, to find meaning in a world that feels too still. I visit Daniel's grave once a year. His family keeps it simple, a small headstone, clean, nothing fancy. I sit there for a while, tell him about Mason, about the kids in training, about how the nightmares have gotten quieter. And before I leave, I always say the same thing. We made it out, brother. You helped me find the way. Because even in the dark, he did. Some nights, when the wind cuts through the trees, I swear I can smell the Afghan dust again. That mix of cordite, sweat, and sunrise. And for a heartbeat, I'm back there, rifle in hand, the world burning around us, the mission clear. But then the wind shifts, and I'm home again. Alive. And that's enough. I still keep the notebook. The one I carried through every deployment. The pages are worn, the ink faded, but the last line is still clear. Survive. Remember. Honor. Those were the only rules that ever mattered. And somehow, against the odds, I did. So when people ask me what the war was like, I tell them this. It wasn't about glory. It wasn't about flags or orders or medals. It was about the man next to you. It was about doing what had to be done when it mattered most. And if you're lucky, if you're very lucky, you live long enough to tell the story.